Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, we have a tremendous episode for you, a conversation with Dr. Judith Orloff. She's the author of 4 books, the most recent, The Genius of Empathy, where we talk about and dig into the psychology behind how ambitious, hard-charging, high achievers, those type A-driven individuals can build more empathy into their leadership style, into their work style, to get the most out of their team, their colleagues, their peers, etc. Tremendous conversation, especially for those of you who struggle with empathy. Before we get there, I want to introduce you to 2 new resources. First, I announced a new book project that I am co-authoring with Chris Paradiso called The Civilized Savage: From Mediocrity to Mastery in an Age of Cultural Conformity. This is going to be a tremendous book. Go to civilizedsavagebook.com. Also have a link in the description below. You can sign up. You get a free PDF that we put together with a bunch of quotes and individuals breaking down why we believe these specific individuals embody the civilized savage mentality, as well as the quote that we grabbed from them that we think puts a keystone on top of that idea. I also launched a brand new ebook called 7 Ways to Make Better Decisions Using AI. This is particularly for leaders, managers, entrepreneurs, people who want to use AI, not just to push out fancy marketing language and write better emails, but to make better decisions. This is a meaty book. I think it's got like 40 pages. There's tons of resources in it. There's how-tos, there's checklists. Guys, I spent a lot of time putting this together. To me, we need to get out in front of AI as quickly as possible. And if you go to ai.ryanhanley.com, you'll be able to download that for free. Get it. It's available to you. Also, we'll have the link in the description below for that resource as well. With all that said, it's time to get on to Dr. Judith Orloff.
Let's go. Yeah, make it look easy. Hey, stand up guy on 10 toes. Big body pull up in a Range Rover. I can change the whole game when I say.
Well, it's awesome to have you on the show. I've been waiting a few weeks to chat with you. Excited for it and glad you're here.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah. So let's get right into a question that you actually brought up before we went live. Is empathy a soft skill? Like, where does that fall, and how do you frame it as someone who's an expert on this topic?
I think in the past, empathy has been thought of as a soft skill, and I'm presenting it in The Genius of Empathy as the missing skill that can turn your business interactions around, can increase success, can increase connection to other people, and increase success overall. And so it's something, if you feel that it's a soft skill, I'd invite you to shift your thinking, to grow larger, and to see how it can help you in every aspect of your life, not just business. It can help you in your relationships. Just imagine a relationship without empathy. I mean, that's, it's brutal to think about it. And to really think about it as a business skill that could promote everything you dream about, and get you to exactly where you want to be in the most surprising ways.
Awesome. So I think maybe another place early on here in our conversation is it's good to just take a step back and maybe what exactly is empathy? Like, is it just feelings? Is it caring about people? Like, I would reckon that a lot of people listening might think they know what empathy is, but I'm super interested in your take, your definition, and how you frame it.
Empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And it's also about self-empathy. But how can you have empathy for yourself, which is a missing skill in our society, as people beat themselves up all the time, constantly. And also how to attune with people, and how to really resonate with people and get on their wavelengths so that you could connect to them and succeed in whatever your interaction is with that person. You can get a sense of where they're coming from. And basically what people want is they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be valued. And if you could communicate that to them, you are so much ahead of everybody else, because usually people are a bit combative and they play games and nasty. And empathy, even if you don't like someone, in the book, I want to make this point. I feel that you could have empathy even if you don't like someone. and that it's essential that you do, especially in business, if you're in business, because if you let your own opinions about someone, which are neither here nor there, are opinions, it could stop you from achieving great things. But if you don't like somebody and you're listening to them, what you can say that it is empathic is, I hear you. Thank you for sharing this, and I'm going to take it under consideration. As opposed to just giving off these vibes of I hate this person, I don't believe in what they're talking about, all kinds of, in which you may not believe in what they're talking about, but you don't have to. And what I'm talking about is changing the paradigm of how you conduct business. Instead of using your personal opinions about somebody as a guide to how you treat them, to treat them in a bit of a different way with respect, even if you don't like them. It's, in the book, I call it the Namaste effect, which is, I respect the spirit within you, even though I might not like you, even though I might not see you again on the path. I respect the spirit within you. It's in India, a lot of people greet each other with that Namaste. And that means I respect the spirit within you, not that I have to like you. So it's different. And it just depends on whether you want to take your relationships to the next level. If you want to continue doing what you're doing, I'm not sure if anyone on this podcast would do this, but if you're aggressive and combative and manipulative, and if that's all you are, then you're perpetuating an old paradigm of business, which is pretty negative. Hopefully we can evolve a little bit more where you could be strong and aggressive and also kind, and be so confident in yourself that you could be kind as you're saying no, or setting limits, or making a big deal. It's just another element to bring in to your business interactions that will surprise people because they're not really expecting that. However, there's a section in the book on empathic leadership, and who are the empathic leaders, and who are our role models, and how do they do it, and still be hugely successful. That's, you don't have to do the old paradigm of Wall Street to be hugely successful.
It sounds to me like the lack of empathy that we have is maybe part of the polarization that we see in our society today. Take even out politics. It feels like on every issue, from sporting events to parenting to basically everything, people have bifurcated along these lines in which you pick a side and you agree with everything that side says on that particular topic, and you view everyone who takes the other side as, wrong or bad or evil. And, is that playing into the polarization that we see today?
If that's all there is, yeah, because that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a whole world like that. And that's a pretty miserable world. So the reason I wrote The Genius of Empathy is to present another way, to present an additional resource that people can use, even though it may seem counterintuitive at some points, to really show people empathy and respect and kindness, regardless of your personal opinion. As if you start fueling the polarization, it will grow like a virus, and it will grow everywhere because it taps into the lowest part of ourselves as human beings. And we all have a dark side. We do. But we want to be aware of that dark side and not feed it. And the polarization and making it about us versus them, and this is the enemy, and this is the friend, and this person isn't like me, so I don't like them, and I can't have empathy for them, that gets us nowhere. And if we look at history, you could see it's a millennium full of war and pain. It's very rare that we go through periods of peace or tranquil. But what I'm presenting is perhaps another element you can add in your business practice or in your personal relationships that will up-level them, that will improve them, that will make you feel better about yourself, and will make other people love and respect you. And I think that's what we want, that feels good, and that we come from our hearts, not just our heads. We come from our heads and our heart. So I'm not suggesting we don't come from our heads and use all the brilliant analysis in our mind. I'm a psychiatrist who uses empathy and intuition in my practice. So this is something I've integrated with my conventional medicine. And so this is what I'm suggesting that you do with your business practices or whatever field you're in, to integrate the best of all your training, and try and come from a higher place, because you'll become more successful. You'll become happier with yourself. Other people will be happier with you. And you'll see how you could, find incredible success without having to, do the old school Wall Street form of manipulation and killing the enemy, or killing the competition. You could be successful financially and do it a different way.
Is it possible to be empathetic if you don't love yourself, if you have self-doubt, if you lack confidence? Is it possible to put yourself in someone else's emotional shoes if you're coming from such a place of personal emotional weakness?
I think so. I think the more we can love ourselves, and by that, I mean, just say nice things to yourself in your own head. You know what goes on in your head. And I, as a psychiatrist, know what goes on in other people's heads, in my own head. It's human to have all these negative voices all the time. And you could try and hide them and put a front up, but, you have to deal with them and be kinder to yourself. So the more you have that kindness and give yourself a break. Let's say you make a mistake. Let's say something didn't go well. That's life. Sometimes things go well, sometimes they don't. That is life. But for you to show yourself some respect and honor yourself. So the more you can do that, the more empathy you can have for other people. But, I've seen people who really don't like themselves very much be amazing with other people. I've talked to therapists, friends over the years, how much easier it is to have empathy for our patients than ourselves. So the self-empathy part of the book, which is a full chapter, is something you need to develop and commit to. And it feels really good. When you're able to treat yourself with kindness, rather than waking up at 3 a.m. and beating yourself up and trying to solve problems that are not solvable on the level of the mind, and this torturing yourself and staying up at night, and maybe turning to drugs and alcohol. It can lead to all kinds of things. You want to be happy with yourself at the end of the day. At the end of the day, you want to be happy with yourself, and you have to decide what will make you happy. And I'm telling you, I've worked with a lot of people, who are passing over. And the last thing they say, that they wish they had more money. That's the last thing they say, or that I wish I would have worked longer hours. They say, I want to be around people who love me. I want to spend time out in nature. I want to do something nice for myself. I didn't spend enough time being nice to myself or doing things that I love. So, keep that in perspective. I like that, one day to live kind of attitude. If this was your last day to live, how would you live it? Would you be cutthroat? Would you be, after your competitor and wanting to build up your bank account? Or what would you want to do? Would you want to be nicer to yourself? Would you want to take a rest? Would you want to go by the ocean and just look at the beautiful waves? What would you want to do? You'd be with loved ones? So you have to ask yourself that, because our life passes by pretty quickly, day at a time. But you want to be happy with yourself. And I don't think you're going to end up being that happy with yourself unless you can include empathy and more self-love and more growth in that area in a kind way.
Yeah. How do you exude strength as a leader, and that doesn't have to be a leader of a business. It could be of a community organization, a nonprofit, et cetera. How do you exude strength as a leader while also embodying and displaying empathy?
Right. Well, I want to make clear that empathy is not about being a doormat. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with being excellent at setting boundaries, at saying no, at having clear lines about what you want and what you don't want and sticking to them, and you can do that and still have empathy. So it's not either or. You could be as tough inside and as strong inside as you want to be in terms of your what your goals are. And you could say no to people. Sometimes people mistake me, for being, too soft or whatever. And I am fierce about setting boundaries and, not being a doormat and not letting people walk all over me or not giving my time, to people who are not reciprocating, or I really don't believe in my energy being drained by overgiving and feeling miserable for the whole world all the time. I don't do any of those things. And you see, I could do it. All those are resolutions I've made, as I want to be, full of energy and keep fulfilling my dreams. I don't want to be exhausted, from absorbing everybody else's energy and trying to help everybody all the time. You can't help everybody all the time, though I would want to. I can't. So that's a way of really knowing yourself and being strong. And yet also you still have that kindness when you look at people and I say no to you. No, I'm sorry, I can't do that business deal with you. I could do it in a nice way. I don't have to do it in a miserable way. And that's a form of strength.
I know some of the people that I've worked with in my executive coaching role or as advisor. I do a lot of advising for startups. I've been an entrepreneur myself. A common thread, never necessarily articulated exactly this way. So I'm kind of piecing together a bunch of different comments or concerns into one statement. But it's essentially, if I give my people too much rope, they either take advantage of me or they start to play like a victimhood card. And therefore, I'd rather be feared and respected than loved. And, this kind of comes back in my mind in turning this around is comes back to this idea of empathy and maybe purposefully not being empathetic because of a fear of either being taken advantage of or having someone throw it back in our face, particularly with the younger generation that we have today who likes to play the victimhood card. Like, how do you navigate that? How do you make sure that because most of them are very kind people. They'd rather be nice to their team, but they're so concerned that, if someone tells me they need to work at home on a Friday because of family issues, that they're not going to, they're just going to take advantage of me and not get anything done or whatever. How do we navigate this? How do we make sure that being empathetic and treating people well and caring about them and trying to walk in their shoes and doing the right thing? How do we make sure we don't get run over or taken advantage of?
Well, you have to, test it out. If that person needs to work at home, you need to assess what kind of work production they had when they, were at home. And if they didn't adequately work at home, you need to talk to them about it, that doesn't seem to be working for us, because you're not as productive. Sometimes I understand you need to work at home, but you need to be productive as well. So you just talk to them that way, like a human, and you're just direct with them. You're direct and you're not afraid of them. And, if they start getting into the victim role, I think it's important in terms of the milieu of business is to realize the victim role gets you nowhere. That if you get into the victim role, you will be so much less successful and you give up all your power when you're in the victim role. So that needs to be addressed, hopefully in a work environment that, where you can openly talk about those things. And in your team, because if the team turns into a victim team, you're not going to be very successful. No, the victimhood is the worst thing you could do in every situation. It just doesn't work, and you don't want to indulge that. So you want to have some way of kindly stepping in and saying, hey, I'm seeing this pattern in the team. Let's talk about it. If you have that, that open-ended environment. And I know some tech companies have that. I've spoken at Google a number of times, about these issues, and they brought me in, and I did various workshops with them and empathy trainings with them, because people are interested in that. How do you do that? How would that work? Like what you're saying. And so I think we need a lot of education, but hopefully, if you're listening to this, or if you're in higher management, you must realize the basic fact that if you're in victim mode, you won't be successful.
Yeah.
That will not work. That's like no.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of commiserating. So I'm 43. So say late 30s, early 40s to even some of my friends that are in their early 60s who are in leadership positions. They're struggling with the generation below mine because seemingly victimhood has worked for them.
How so?
I think that, I think that an over-indexing on kind of toxic, we'll call it a toxic empathy. It's a I care so much, I'll do anything for this result, whether you like it or not. I will, my situation requires me to take, these 10 medications. I need mental health days. I need to work from home. I need more vacation time so that I'm in the right mental state to show up. I don't like when you talk to me aggressively because of my insert some sort of perceived minority demographic of any version at this point. I somehow have been treated differently and therefore deserve more or more chances, etc. And you get this across the board. And to be honest with you, I don't want to ping anyone because seemingly I've talked to a lot of business leaders. There are stories from just about every demographic, including straight white men, who create these situations in which somehow they've been victimized in a way that they deserve something and insert whatever their perceived thing is. Now, and my point in asking you that is, I don't see that. You hit like 22 or below, and that pendulum seems to have swung back more to a moderate, rational place. And then I'd say late 30s and beyond, that was never the case. I mean, I certainly was never raised that way. And the idea of asking for some of the things that I've even been asked for and seem insane. But there is this bubble in the middle of like mid 30s to mid 20s that is coming through our system and is now starting to move into middle manager roles, et cetera. And the stories that some of my friends tell who are in leadership positions are insane, and they don't know how to deal with it. And these are good people who want to do right by their employees. They're not slave drivers. They're not, win at all cost, 80-hour a week, kill or be killed type people. They want to run businesses people enjoy working with, and they just become flabbergasted because they don't know how to deal with it. It's like they want to give, but if they give, then it's 10 more asks. And I don't, in many cases, I don't necessarily have great advice for them. How would you counsel them to work through that type of environment?
I would show empathy for them and set limits with what kind of behavior is going to be successful and accepted in the team. I mean, you have to have a culture in your team, and you have to decide what that culture is. It can't just be willy-nilly. If somebody comes up and makes all these demands, you can't, I think people get scared. Having empathy means you're strong. You see, this isn't going to work, and here's this person making these demands. So you have to have a culture in a team. You have to have an agreement about how your team is working. If everybody's doing something different and they're feeling this and they're feeling that, they're not a cohesive team. So it's important to bring everybody together and to have empathy, but also, set the limits. It's okay to say, well, I'm sorry, that's not going to work. That's not really, in sync with what we're doing here, but I want to compromise. I want to work with you, and I want to hear what you're saying. So empathic leaders, I have a whole chapter on empathic leadership and what to say in various situations and what not to say.
Yeah.
Like when someone is whining, what not to say is stop whining. You're required to do your work, so do it. Cancel plans with your family if necessary. Put in more hours until you finish. That's what not to say. What to say is it's clear to all of us that we were being asked to do more than we had planned. I know this feels overwhelming, but we will support each other and get through it. I appreciate all of you. So, you acknowledge, let's say you have so much overwork, you acknowledge that, and then you bring everyone together. And if they say, I can't, I have to go home, I have to, you work with them to see if that's possible. And if it's not possible, then perhaps the compromise is, half and half. I mean, you work with people, you listen to people. And the thing is, so the sense I get from you is that, we don't trust our teams. We don't trust each other. They're like adversaries, in terms of this one asking for too much. I don't know how to deal with this one. It's not working. This one's asking this and this one's, but it's not a team is a team.
Yeah.
And so that's where empathy comes in, because you have to have the basis of trust in a team. If you don't have that, it's going to be all over the place, and you're going to look at each other as the enemy. And the team needs to work together, like strung together. It's a very kind of a sacred thing, a team working together for the higher good.
Yeah. And I think some of the lack of team and culture is right. I think some of it is, I think you used the word before. I think a lot of leaders today are incredibly poor, or do not slow down to make the time to set boundaries and communicate those boundaries properly to their team.
Right.
And oftentimes I find, if you upfront address, here is how we work. Yes, you're on salary, and yes, on most weeks you'll work 40, but there will be weeks where I need you to stay more, and it might be 50. And that's the boundary. Not being able to stay occasionally, once or twice a month, for an extra few hours is unacceptable. That's unacceptable. You have to be willing and able to do that when necessary and upfront. And I think what happens is, we're in an effort to be accepting, jovial, whatever we're looking for. We under deliver on the boundaries, and therefore people don't know where they are. So they push and push and push. And I think especially some of my friends who are in, say, that are maybe 10, 15 years older than me, the previous societal culture that they experienced early in their career, no one asked for more than what was normally accepted. So they never had to deal with it, right? So you didn't have to set boundaries, because the boundaries were just like understood. And now this generation in particular that I'm talking about, like, kind of some of the millennials, some of the zennials, I guess, they'll ask for everything until you tell them to stop, and they don't know how to deal with that while still being nice. So then some of them overreact the wrong way, and they become jerks, and then they hate themselves for being jerks, or they don't. And now it becomes a very combative environment. And I guess what I'm hearing from you is that, and I agree, is that setting those boundaries up front and first might head all of this off at the pass.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to assume the best in people in the beginning. You have to trust each other if you're in a team. If you don't trust each other, you're not going to go anywhere. So you have to treat each other with respect. And in the beginning, be transparent, and empathic. You can definitely set a limit. People are afraid to set limits and boundaries in business or in personal relationships because they feel guilty. They're afraid they're not going to be loved. They're afraid that people will resent them, all kinds of, fears because of the early child upbringing that they went through, where it wasn't safe to set boundaries at home. So they never learned to do it. And it's an essential skill that goes along hand in hand with empathy. If I don't know how to set boundaries, I'm going to be exhausted by my interactions with people, because they're going to drain me, with all this behavior. But if I'm clear, let's say we're in a specific situation, a team situation, we have too much work, nobody likes it, we're tired, and but we've got to do it as a team together. It's you have to start with trust. And so when you hire people, I think it's essential that you tell them the truth and see if that's what they want, if they want to, sign on to that. And but what makes it all easier with all the stresses of business, and what makes the success is the unity and the empathy, which raises the vibration up, which has the team as a whole, and you have the sense you could work through things together.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Do you believe, and this is a shot in the dark based on what we're talking about, but I'm kind of thinking on the fly as I listen to you. Do you believe that the removal of, say, general patriotism, and we could say like national anthem, Pledge of Allegiance type things, and God and prayer from public school is a big part of the reason that we're not taught empathy? Because, we used to have to do the pledge. We did the national anthem every day. Many of my teachers, when I was coming through public school, had some religious, at least you could talk about God in classrooms. And all those things tend to come with an understanding of a greater, of working for something more than myself. Like empathy to me is oftentimes a derivative of believing that there's more in the world than just me, right? It's removal of that self-orientation.
That's a key realization.
Right? Like our world today, and it is so like me, mine. What do I get? Where am I? How do people view me? But I'm not getting enough or whatever, right? It's all about my stuff, my place, my house, my car. And growing up, team sports, competition, doing things like simply saying the pledge in the morning and understand that you're part of this country of 300 million odd people. I grew up with a religious background, Christianity. I was Catholic. And, you always had this sense that there's more to the world than just you. Now, I'm not saying you have, those are the only paths, but certainly I'm a strong believer that the removal of those things from public school has had a major detriment, not just empathy, but it feels like it could be part of it, because we're certainly not taught empathy in schools. There's no empathy class. There's no, being an emotionally healthy human class that we get. And all of a sudden we're thrown out into the world and we're supposed to be empathetic. It's kind of like a crapshoot, whether your parents taught it to you or not. Like, does that, I guess that's more of a statement or just a general thesis than it is a question, but where do you fall on what I just said?
Well, I think I'll try and answer that, but I think for me, going through all those early schools, what was most powerful were the role models. I had some teachers who were incredible role models for me, and I learned from them what their beliefs were and how they taught me. And, I was lucky to have a very good education, with some empathic people, with people who embodied empathy. So that's, and my mother and father were both doctors, and I have 25 physicians in my family. So, I also learned empathy from them. So it's a kind of a special situation for that. I mean, they weren't always empathic, but, they believe with patients they were, but, but I don't know, in terms of the Pledge of Allegiance, I think if that's meaningful to you and that brings you to your heart, and it makes you appreciate other people around you as our humankind, and there is something greater than your own needs. I want, like a baby, that's a baby with the bottle, it's like we're fixated with the nipple. So, yeah, I think that could be helpful, given the way that you feel about it. Everybody has different feelings about things. So, the thing about empathy is that you want to know how each person feels. You don't want to extrapolate how you feel onto somebody else, but you do want to listen to how they feel. And you might not like how they feel, like the me. There's ways of dealing with that. And you need to say to them at some point, those people, I really want to help you get what you need. I really want to listen to you, and that will calm them down. You see, they're like babies that aren't being listened to, so they're crying, and they're kind of regressed when they're in that me state. That's the infant state. And so you have to deal with it as such, but you want to calm them down and say, I want to give you what you need. I want to talk to you about what you need. Let's go out to lunch, and let's Let's bond.
So let's say I'm listening to this and I'm a leader of an organization, regardless of size, and this is something I struggle with. I'm a hard charger, say I'm a driver, or whatever moniker you want to put on those people are in the upper right quadrant of every personality test. And, but I understand, I'm aware enough to know that this is a weakness of mine. What could I do besides spending some time with your work, which I dove into both on your website and getting into the books? Like, what are maybe just a few simple takeaways, or even if it's just one thing that someone could do today to start to cultivate more empathy in their life if they know this is a weakness for them?
Well, you could be a hard charger and have empathy. I'm not against hard chargers. I'm all for them. If that's who you are and that's your personality, go for it. I think that's incredible, but you want to be a hard charger with empathy. You see, that's what sometimes people can't wrap their minds around, that they can be both, that you can be this hard charger. You could listen to what someone's feeling and still say it's not possible for us to do that. I'm sorry, maybe next time. And I'm open to listening to your ideas. I value your ideas, just not in this project. That won't work. So you can be a hard charger and speak the truth, in an empathic way. That's what I'm suggesting, is you shift your energy when you talk to people. So you're not a hard charger and mean and horrible, and people feel this tall when you're done with them. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's what people do because they don't know any other way.
Yeah.
That's what their father did to them.
Let's say you're that person. Exactly. And that's kind of my question is, let's say you are that person who you don't know any other way, but you're self-aware enough to know that this is a weakness of yours and you would like to improve it. You would like to take this weakness and start to cultivate being a more empathetic person to your team. You may, I know quite a few guys, these just are men. I'm not saying it doesn't happen to women. Just the particular 3 or 4 people who are in my brain are all men, who they're driven, hardworking people. They tend to come off as jerks to their team and they know it. But they don't mean it, right? Like they know, they just don't slow down enough, or they don't give it enough weight or whatever to be that empathetic leader. But I know all of them, if you pull them aside and you talk to them offline, they will tell you it's something they would like to be. It's a known weakness. Is there a journal prompt? Is there a activity? Is there a mental exercise or whatever you recommend that they could start to do to build that in? Is it maybe just notating when you have a bad interaction and what maybe you could have done differently? Like what is something that individual could do to start to bring more empathy into their life if they want it?
Okay, what I suggested in the book is to prepare before you go into a meeting and to set your where you want to be at. You don't want to be rushing going into a meeting. You want to have maybe a few minutes where you can center yourself. You can say, I want to be this way with this group. I want to ask people for their opinions. I want to slow myself down. I want to take a breath before I go in, so I'm not so tense and wired so tightly that I say things I don't like. I want to be a better person, and I want to learn. You see, there's a certain humility to wanting to learn this, and not be all threatened by it. It's an evolution in how you're treating people and how you're treating yourself. It will only benefit everybody. Yeah. But the ego gets so challenged by this. But you have this journal prompt beforehand where you write, who do I want to be? What words do I want to say? I hear what you're saying is a good word to begin with for the team. When they express themselves, I hear what you're saying. Thank you. And you don't have to fix it. You don't have to do anything at the moment. Just begin to shift the energy of being an empathic team rather than this hard charging, cold or nasty leader that you don't want to be. So slow it down. I think the type of person you're talking about are wound so tight and they might drink a lot of caffeine before the meeting. You might want to cut that down a bit so you're not so when you go into the meeting.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love that you shared listening. Listening is something that So I was, and I've shared this on the podcast before, about 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with hyperactive bipolar. And for the previous 41 years of my life, I just thought I was nuts. And I had all this rampant energy that was always way more than everyone else in the room. And for a while, I thought it was a superpower. And then it also has downsides. And when I really started to do some internal work and say, okay, I want to evolve as a leader, I don't want to be that leader that has, maybe a few like really high positives, but then also has really low negatives. And then I went and saw some doctors, whatever, and kind of came back with this diagnosis. And while nothing has really changed in terms of how I take care of myself, and diet's a little different, exercise, stuff like that, it was one of the big takeaways that my counselor gave me was listening. She's like, just make a habit of listening to people. Like listen. Like when I say listen, don't wait to respond. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying listen to the words they're saying. This podcast helps a lot. This is almost daily practice at this point in listening. But and she actually turned me on to this ancient Chinese proverb that I enjoy. Or it's kind of more of a story. There's a Chinese monk and a new student comes to see him and sits down and asks if he can share time and learn from him. Monk says fine, goes and gets tea, sets tea down, and the pours the tea, and the student starts talking. And time goes by, and the student is still talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. And finally, the monk stands up and grabs the teapot and starts refilling the student's cup until the cup starts overflowing the cup and onto the tray. And the student's yelling, "Whoa, stop, my cup is full." And the monk sits down and says, "The value of the cup is its emptiness." And Bruce Lee took that on as a mantra. And I have found that just those 3 words or 4 words, the value of the cup is its emptiness, I guess 5 words, has been something that I try to play in my head before I go into podcasts, before I go into important meetings with people. I coach Little League Baseball, and before I interact with 12, 10-year-olds who are absolutely off the wall, I'll try to tell myself this emptiness thing, because we just, when you listen to somebody, it's almost difficult not to be empathetic with them, but we just don't listen.
Yeah. Well, if you're triggered, it's hard to listen. So that's, I'm just adding one, little element, because there's in the book, I have a chapter on the obstacles to empathy. And one of the obstacles is being triggered. If a team member is triggering you with something, and when that happens, and it will happen, of course, you're going to be triggered in that intimate environment. You want to deal with it on your own, not with the person. You want to say, "Hey, I'm triggered. I notice that I'm reactive here, and I'm about to say something I regret, and I don't want to do that because that's going to cause damage." So that's how to be empathic with yourself. That's what to say to yourself. Take the sacred pause, maybe take a break for the meeting, get yourself back together again. And, it's your, this is the harder part of empathy. It's your work to, help to backtrack and see where that trigger came from.
Yeah.
Was it your father trying to control you all the time? So you just get enraged when that happens. And the thing about empathy is that, and self-empathy, is when you do this kind of exploration, you could do it with a therapist, you do it with a coach, you can do it, just in journaling, is that it does require some accountability, for your triggers and, wanting to clear them so that you're not always so reactive. And the reason you want to do that is when you're triggered, your power is gone. You're not in your power, and you want to be in your power in your interactions. But if you're triggered, it's all over. If you're just reacting from that place.
I couldn't agree with that more. I love that. Dr. Judith, this has been tremendous. We have so many leaders who listen to this show, and I think that this is empathy is something too many of us give lip service to without actually putting into practice. I think that your work is incredible. Where can people go to get more of you, what you do, your books, et cetera? Where's the best place to go?
My website is great. It's Dr Judith Orloff, ORLOFF.com. And you can get The Genius of Empathy there on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores. And I have a lot of empathy resources. I give empathy training programs for businesses as well that you could find out on my website.
Well, I'm so glad we got to share this time. For you guys listening at home, you can go directly to where everything Dr. Judith sent you. I'll also have everything in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll have all these links in the description as well, so you can click over. I think that this is something we need to have real discussions around. We need to practice in a way that is healthy and productive. And in doing so, I think it's the only way to get the most out of your people. So I'm so glad we were able to share time. I'm so glad we were able to expose this audience to you. And I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Let's go. Yeah, make it look easy. Hey, stand up guy on 10 toes. Big body pull up in a Range Rover. I can change the whole game when I say so. I pull up, shut it down, yeah, they know. Running this game ain't a thing for me. I never switched up, no change in me. The only thing changing is season.